Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reacting to
10 things US of A that's better than Sweden. So yesterday we reacted to him talk a little shit about America. Let's see, now he giving a little praise.
Sweden is a pretty good country. I like it, despite all the problems we've had lately. There are many things that Sweden does better than the US, but not everything.
2 days ago.
2 days ago.
Far from it. This is a list of 10 things the US does better than Sweden. It's easy for Swedes to make fun of Americans because of their extroverted nature. They're loud and obnoxious, and they take a lot of space, and they have a compulsion to always make small talk. But there's another side to all of that. Americans seem to be actually interested in their surroundings to a higher degree than Swedes. People from the US will actively reach out and help others. I know that doesn't really make sense.
I feel like, I don't know, every point he makes is always such a broad generalization that in my mind I always think of exceptions to that, because I remember like when your family comes and they see like little things that people can take for granted and they're like super happy and excited for it. I see that as just as outgoing too as well.
Well, yeah, he's talking about Swedes though. You know, not Europeans. Maybe Swedes are as a culture different, you know, from other parts of Europe. I don't know. But I do agree with what you're saying, but by nature these videos that we react to, they're generalizations. It's always, you know, it's never like applies to every single person.
One from, for example, New York. In New York you can get away with murder in the middle of a crowd. But in Sweden you can get away with doing a song and a dance naked while throwing a bunch of school children into a wood chipper without anyone glancing your way. People in Sweden generally keep to themselves in the extreme.
He's saying people don't really care about their surroundings, they just focus what they gotta do and that's it. Kind of put a little blinders on, they don't see nothing what's going on around, that's what he's saying.
Meanwhile, many people in the US are more caring and generous and helpful to people in their surroundings.
Generous, yes, I would say, again, can't speak for Europe, but like compared to like Lithuania, Americans are way more, like donating things is way more
poor people. Especially
for the weirdest thing.
It's so weird.
The people that don't got money, they want to donate. And you know, I'm not saying the rich do donate too, but they don't donate as much as they could afford to donate. But I feel like they do it for like a tax write-off for business practices. But when people who have less money, they're not gonna get a tax benefit from doing the donations that they do. I feel like, wow, that's such an interesting paradox.
I
would say Americans are more willing to donate. Yeah.
Because I don't think in Europe, maybe they can be the same way too.
I can't speak for all Europe, I can only speak for Lithuania, so.
I find it extremely weird, but it is a very nice trait that Americans have. Sweden is a powerhouse when it comes to technology and innovation, at least when you consider that it's a small country with 11 million people. Sweden punches above its own weight class when it comes to tech companies and famous brands, but if I compare that with the US, then we're not even competing in the same sport. The scientific and technological advances that the US make are quite simply unparalleled. There are many other countries that invent things. Sweden and Switzerland have the highest number of patents per capita in Europe, for example. But that pales in comparison with
you know, there's a lot of Swedish brands that, you know, we know, IKEA, Spotify.
Innovations coming from this side of the pond. The US is famous for Silicon Valley, but that's just one tech hotspot. There are so many others. And there are tons of world-famous research institutes at Harvard, MIT, Columbia, Stanford.
I wonder, I feel like, do you think Silicon Valley is dying?
No. Why would it be dying?
Because I feel like, okay, what we see now, instead of Silicon Valley, they go to like Florida.
It's not dying.
No, because they say in Miami they're investing a lot into tech. So what we see is like Amazon's moving their Amazon's not tech?
Amazon is not moving nothing to Miami. Where did you hear that?
In the newspaper.
I didn't hear any Amazon moving anything.
Okay then.
And Amazon is not in Silicon Valley. Amazon is in Seattle. Silicon Valley is Facebook, Google, Twitter, like X, all those companies.
So where's that?
That's in Silicon Valley.
Which is?
San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
Also, most of the biggest companies in the world can be found in the US. I have to say that I'm extremely impressed with the science and the technology that the US produces.
It seems like he's in San Francisco, the San Francisco Bridge.
Speaking of science and research, that brings me to the next point where America outshines Sweden. In order to do quality research, you need to have quality schools, and at least some schools in the US are top-notch. I'm not saying that every school in America...
Yeah, we talked about this in one of the reactions. I believe I said if you got money, US education school is likely better than Europe. But if you like average person, Europe is better.
Is good? Of course not. But the very best schools in the world can be found here. Sweden has free education, and Swedes are highly educated in general. But I'd say that Sweden has a good average education level, while the US has higher peaks and deeper valleys.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
It can be argued whether or not this is good, but there's no denying that for privileged people, American schools can provide a much better education than in Sweden. Sweden has 2 universities in the top 100 in the world, while the US has 7 in the top 10. The top American schools truly outshine the top Swedish ones.
I think maybe that was Alcatraz.
When I made a video about things the UK does better than Sweden, I mentioned salaries, and that made many people upset. The salary situation in the UK is a bit difficult to compare to Sweden, because it varies so much between London and other places. In the end, many people claim that Sweden actually has higher salaries than the UK instead. But when we're talking about the US, things are much simpler. Or so I thought. It all depends on what type of job we're talking about. If you're making minimum wage in the US, then chances are you'd be better off in Sweden.
I mean, when comparing salaries, I guess you have to compare like the mean salary, So it's just that's simple.
But the thing is, it could be
aside from that, that's the only thing you can do because the country is so big. Like what city, what state, it's gotta go by the mean.
But as soon as we're talking about jobs that require higher education, then salaries in the US skyrocket compared to the ones in Sweden. A software engineer or manager or doctor in Sweden has to be quite well paid to get more than $100,000 per year. But over here, it's insane how many engineering jobs I see that pay several hundreds of thousands of dollars. So when it comes to salaries, I can definitely say that the US is better than Sweden. Most of the time. Or at least some of the time. I love Swedish nature. We have huge forests and mountains and lakes, and we have the most amount of islands in the world. But then I come to the US, and I'm completely blown away by the sheer variety and the sheer beauty of nature here. It's a huge country with enormous variation. On this road trip, I've just been to 2 different states, but I've still seen so many different types of environments. The Nevada desert, the beaches of the West Coast, the cliffs around Big Sur, and of course the majestic massiveness of Yosemite National Park. I'm sorry to say this, but the US absolutely beats Sweden when it comes to nature.
What's the variety, I wonder, in Sweden, the difference?
We've seen Sweden nature. It's a lot of forest, lakes maybe. So it's a nice nature. I think here in the States, because the country is so huge, there's a lot of like different things.
Is it this the place where they spell like FJORD?
Fjords?
Yeah.
Fjords is in Norway.
Norway, okay.
Yeah, but I would think the nature is similar in Norway and Sweden. I don't think they're like significantly different. Mountains, forests, rivers, lakes.
They're on opposite ends. Norway is on the left, and then Sweden is all the way on the right.
Oh no.
No?
The
Isn't it not safe? Oh, it's next to each other, neighbors.
I think part of different cultures. While Sweden is more of it's part of different cultures clashing with each other. This means that you get a lot of authentic cultural events in the US and a lot of ethnic dishes from different countries. While in Sweden you get Asian fusion or pizza. And also some ridiculous attempts at creating multicultural events now and then. It's ironic that America is often criticized for not having a culture of its own because it's such a new country. But it's still adopted.
Yeah, I feel like when it comes to cultural integration, I don't think anybody can compare to the States. The UK, I think, can come close. I think they're well integrated, to be fair. Yeah, but I do think the States is the most integrated.
They said that their food may be...
Well, with integration comes the food from all over the world, so you can't integrate the food as well. So that does the part of the integration is that you can pick other foods.
One one food that they show on TikTok is the UK Chinese versus American Chinese.
And
they're
both not Chinese?
No.
Integrated.
And adapted many other cultures. Sweden, on the other hand, is pretty stagnant when it comes to cultural integration. It's more like oil and water than a cultural melting pot in Sweden. What do you do if you're in the mood for a cold one in the US? In most states, you can simply go to the closest Walmart and pick up a six-pack. Mission accomplished. Now, what would you have to do in Sweden? Well, you'd have to go to Systembolaget, the state-owned liquor store, and pray that they're open. They're always closed.
I remember when we did Swedish reactions, that was one of the things, but that's specific to Sweden. It's not really reflective of all Europe.
On Sundays and on holidays, for example. Okay, you can also go to bars in both Sweden and the US, but it's expensive to drink in Sweden, so you wanna beer at home as well. And for situations like that, the US is definitely more convenient for drunken bastards like me. In fact, guess who's gonna have a couple of cold beers after this hike? I'll give you a hint. He has a mic and a camera, and it's me. What's the latest Swedish TV show you watched? Or the latest Swedish movie? I guess you might have read
Love is Blind Sweden.
Some Swedish crime novels, or listened to some Swedish music. But that's probably it. Sweden is good at producing media for a small country. But the US is dictating media consumption for the entire world.
I mean, after our reactions to Swedish producers and artists, they deserve the shout out for the music industry, though. That's for like the country that size, they're very powerful in music.
Hollywood is enormous.
Yeah, it's not Europe, everywhere. Like their music, you saw. Remember their producer worked as big as Katy Perry, Britney Spears, The Weeknd, everybody. So
US music industry is huge. And American TV shows is the de facto standard if you're going to watch anything on TV. The US is quite simply dominating media when it comes to everything. Sweden produces a lot of artists for a small country, but the US produces much more, even if you count per capita. I don't really have any statistics for that. I'm just pulling numbers out of my rear end, but I think it's true. Do you agree, or does this sound like complete rubbish to you? Maybe I should have done the research on this one.
I think, if we putting media together, we can, talk about it, but we're separating music and leaving like music for whatever it is and just talk about straight up video media. I think for video media, like the movies, TV shows, the stage is definitely number one by far. But if you're talking, music, I think they're kind of, but per capita especially, they're hand in hand. I think, so you can't dismiss Swedish music. They're very powerful.
Some countries have a collectivist culture, and some have an individualist culture. You can probably guess which one the US has. From initial glance, you might think that Sweden and the US are diametrically opposed, since Sweden focuses on conformity and fitting in. But looks can be deceiving. Contemporary Sweden has a weird mix of conformity and individualism, just like it has a history of socialist values, but it is a capitalist society. But Swedish individualism is still much more focused on fitting in with the cultural mold of Sweden. You can have a lot of individual desires, but you must still fit in with public expectations. So, at least in my view, it's refreshing to see the extreme individualism that only Americans can display. It's almost like something we Swedes wish we could do, but we don't dare.
And I feel like that's why a lot
There are some things that I'm going to exclude from this list. And first of all, it's anything to do with sport. The American fetish for football and baseball and stuff like that is insane in my view. But then again, I don't watch any sports at all. I'm also not going to include stuff like free refills or supersizing food and stuff like that. If you think that that's good, then maybe you should cut down a bit on food and drink in general. I know, pot calling the kettle black, but still. And I'm definitely not going to include freedom. Take a look at the freedom index and see what position the US is at. And then compare that with Sweden's position and be prepared to spit out that Coors Light you're gulping down.
Oh, I'm curious now.
Look at this. It's warm, it's
I guess that's it. I think he's done.
Guys, of course, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord. And as always, share as much kindness as possible.